Welcome to my talk about efficient development workflows with Composer. So my name is Wolfgang Ziegler, or Fago on Didato, or you can find me under the real Fago at Twitter. Unfortunately, Fago was already taken there. Yeah, I'm doing Drupal already for quite a while, so I'm around more than 10 years already. I've been the leading force behind the Drupal 8 entity field API improvements, and I'm also maintaining the type data API in core. You might also know me from some of my Drupal 7 modules, so I'm also the creator of like the rules module, field collection, or profile 2. I'm working as the CEO or CTO of Tronomics, so I run Tronomics. It's like a small Drupal agency based in Vienna. We're like a team of 5 people, and we use Composer a lot for our projects. So in this session, I really want to share like our experiences, and in particular, like the experiences we also had with working in a team with Composer-based projects, and like tell you what like are the small tricks and everything to like get used to it and to make it just more efficient and nicer to work with it in a team. So first off, I'm wondering how many of you know Compose in some way, like have it used some way? Yeah, so almost everyone, that's perfect. So I have a very short introduction, so I will just very shortly go over it, so everyone is on the same track, and then we'll go and come to the more interesting parts. So Composer is dependency manager for PHP. You use it to create and publish packages. It comes with a composer.json file. It's the metadata of every package. And there's like the central repository of packages, like packages.org, which you can use to look up Composer packages and find new packages that you don't know yet. So a Composer.json file looks like that. So you have a package that has a name, some description, and then there are some more special keys, but most important keys is like the require key, which lists all the dependencies of the package, which Composer will fetch and get for you. For using a package, for adding a dependency, you can use the command Composer require. So you just require the package, and Composer will fetch the package and put it into Composer.json for you. For providing a package, you just add a Composer.json file to a repository, and then you just tag releases and use branches, and you can work from that. And to make it available also to everyone, so everyone can easily find it, you also put it on packages.org. So that's packages.org. As I mentioned, you can find the packages there. Yeah, and then for using Composer in a project, it works the same way. You add a Composer.json, and in the Composer.json, you can specify the type. You just say type project. That way, Composer knows it's not a library, but it's a whole project. And then you add your dependencies the same way. So for example, Drupal in Drupal 8 uses Composer. So you would just use it by like cloning Drupal, and then you run Composer install, which will fetch all the dependencies. So what happens there, it basically, it reads the Composer log file, if there is some. If not, it just generates some. And then it installs that version. So if there's a log file, the log file records all the specific versions that are used. And if it's there, it will just use the exact versions in the log file. It downloads the code, and it usually puts it just in the vendor directory, and it also generates the class autoloader. So for all the packages, it always makes sure you have an autoloader, so you can just include the autoloader of Composer ones, and you don't have to deal and think about autoloading your packages. It will just work. So Composer update then is like a command that you can use to check all your dependencies which are listed in Composer.json, to update that and write new concrete versions in your log file. So basically, Composer update always reads Composer.json and generates a new log file. And Composer install then just looks at the log files. So it's basically only does what is recorded in there. So when you're using Composer in your repository, you would just commit Composer.json, and then in a project you would also commit, of course, the log file, so you record the exact versions that are used. And then for libraries, the log file usually wouldn't be required. but it's usually also a good thing to commit it just for running your tests, so you can make sure that the tests are run with that exact version. And in general, it's suggested that you avoid committing the vendor files. As mentioned, Composer.json just contains the dependencies, and it can also contain like version constraints for your dependencies. So usually you would specify version constraints like, okay, give me version 2.1. something, and Composer will respect that when you run Composer update. So for that, Composer supports many different version constraints. We can have a closer look on that later. But the important thing to know is, like in Composer.json, you would not specify a concrete version. Instead, you just specify that the versions that your application is compatible with. And then Composer update will make sure to pick, based upon that compatibility version, just will pick the latest release on the best version that suits your project. Okay, so enough of the introduction. Let's have a look on how you can apply that to Drupal projects. So probably most of you know Drush Make. With Composer, we don't need it anymore. So it's a total replacement for Drush Make. And that works by having special package repositories for Drupal modules. So there was like packages drupalcomposer.org, which was like an unofficial resource which was provided by some great community members. Meanwhile, we have official package repositories, packages drupal.org for Drupal 7 and also another one for Drupal 8. So you can just use those. And with that, every module and every project on Drupal.org is automatically also available as Composer package. There's a project template which you really should use. It's also provided by the people who are behind the original Composer packages for Drupal modules. And it's just like a ready-to-use Composer template which you can use, and it has everything pre-configured that you need. So if you want to use Composer with your Drupal projects, definitely use that template, check it out. It's the starting way. So you can also, based upon that template, build your own template. But I would really suggest you to check that out in the first place. So how do you use it? You just use the command create project with it. Composer create project, you give it the vendor name and the project name, and it will just take it, fork it, create a new clone of it, run Composer install, and you will have a ready-to-use Drupal installation. So it puts Drupal and everything in a web directory. So in your Git directory, actually you would have the Composer.json file at the root, and everything, it downloads all the modules and everything, and Drupal will be below the web directory. It adds the folder structure, and it also adds Drush, it adds Drupal console, and prepares everything for you to continue working with it. So for adding Drupal modules and themes, you could then just use the regular Composer require command, as I mentioned. And Composer now knows when you require something that it's a Drupal module based upon the type in the package. So as you have seen before, we added like project, we put like type project in our own Composer.json. The same way, when you would do a Drupal module, you would write there type Drupal module, such that Composer knows what you're doing is a Drupal module. So for the modules that you publish on Drupal.org, you don't have to do that, because that's automatically generated by the package repository that is provided by Drupal.org. But if you would like to do your own custom module, then that would be something that you would have to keep in mind. Okay, let's have a closer look on how you can work with that template. So first off, when you have now a project which uses Composer to manage all your Drupal modules and everything, you may forget to run Composer install all the way. So every time when you pull like from the repository, like another developer changed something, just run Composer install, because you never know, maybe the developer changed some module version, he did something, and you always need to make sure that you have the same code as the other developer, of course. So I would suggest really, if you have some deployment alias or something, which you usually use to run, I don't know, update DB to import the config or revert features in Drupal 7, just add Composer install to that alias, so it's never forgotten, and you just run it every time when you pull the changes from the repository. Yeah. Then when adding modules, of course, as mentioned, you can just require the module, but then you can also just specify the version constraint with the command like that. So you just say equal and whatever the version constraint is. So when, like, you can say, give me some major release of version 1, or give me like the latest beta or the latest dev version, like that. Maybe I should mention, like, composer require. It gets to the module, but it also updates the composer JSON file. And what's not so nice about it is actually, by default, it doesn't care about the ordering, so you will end up with a quite messy composer JSON file. But you can just easily tell it to sort the packages it puts into the composer JSON file. So if you specify in your composer JSON file that in the configuration sort packages is true, then it will automatically order them alphabetically in your file. Yeah, then afterwards, to update your modules, as usual, you could just use composer update, and you commit the changes to the composer log file. So that's quite simple. But then, obviously, often you don't want to update all your models at the same time. No, you just want to update like a special module, so you can just pass that to the composer update command. What's a little bit special is if the module has like other dependencies, it would like need some special version of that dependency, which might be not so much the case with modules, but more with some packages. Then you can also pass the parameter with dependencies, which tells composer that it's also allowed to update a dependency of the module that you're updating. So sometimes that's necessary for the updates to be possible. Yeah, and then once you checked out a project, like from a teammate, you might wonder now, okay, what are all the versions which are used in the project? Of course, you could like just look up all the module files and everything, but you can get a very good overview by just using Composer Show. Composer Show will just output like the list of packages in your project, so it will include all the Drupal modules, and it will also show you all the versions which are in use in your project. And if you do Composer Show -d, it will only show you the modules which are directly noded in the Composer JSON file, while when you don't add the -d parameter, it will also show you all the dependencies of the things that you added, which can be actually quite a long list. And it particularly differs, like you can like add a distribution as dependency like that to a Composer project, and then it will like once by default show you all the modules, but if you like pass -d, it will just show you the distribution package. Then if you're wondering where did Composer put your stuff, you can pass the -p parameter. It will output a list of paths for all the packages, so you can easily find them also in your local file system. For adding patches, there's also a package which is Composer Patches. It's added by default by the project template, so you don't have to take care of adding and configuring it. You can just specify the patches that you want to use below like extra patches, and then you just specify like for the package or module the URL to the patch and some custom description. So that's like very straightforward and works very well. But there is also an alternative to patches now with Composer. I mean, it's way easier now to add in your custom repositories. So instead of like just adding in your patches, you can also, in particular, when you use a custom repository to generate the page, just add in the custom repository. So you can do that by like just specifying the custom repository with the repositories key. So you specify the URL, you tell Composer that the repository is just like a Git repository, and you require the dependency as usual. But for that to work, you need to know that the package must have a composer.json file in the repository root. So if you have a module and it does not have a composer.json file, it won't work like that. In that case, you will have to specify the whole package metadata directly below the repository's key. So it's possible as well, it's just a little bit more work. But when you do your own module with your own repository, it's also very useful to stick like with a semantic versioning branching pattern. So by default, like the branching pattern that you would use like for Drupal.org, it's not so nicely handled by Composer because it's not following the semantic versioning principles. So if you do that, I would suggest you to not use the Drupal.org pattern, but go with like the default semantic versioning pattern, and just do branches as I noted here, like 1.x, like for the continuous development branch of version 1.0, or 1.x for just for version 1, if you don't want to have like major minor version in there. And then for releases, just do tags like with free version numbers 1.0.0, 1.0.1, and so on. And Composer will automatically pick it up. And Composer understands it automatic as semantic versioning. That means if you follow the semantic versioning principles, that will work very nicely with the Composer version constraints. So I can really just recommend doing that. So what are some of those constraints? First off, if you just specify one.wildcard, of course, it's like easy to read. It will just take some version of major version 1. By default, it will just take the latest stable release. But of course, Composer will always take all version constraints of all the dependencies that you have in the project into account and figure out what is a compatible version for you in your project. Then there's the special caret symbol which you can use. It basically means use that version or any version higher than that, which is still compatible with that. So it means by default of semantic versioning, if you would go from major version 1 to major version 2, that means it's like an API change. It's backward compatibility breaking. So this won't be allowed by that version constraint. A similar operator is like the tilde, but it's a little bit more confusing. So I would not recommend using it because the meaning is basically everything is allowed, but only changes the last digit of your version constraint. So if you have like a 2-digit version constraint like here, then it would allow everything which is version 1 basically. But if you have like a 3-digit version constraint like here, it would just allow everything which is 1.0. So that's not directly and very easy to understand. So you really have to know what's the operator, how it works. So I would just recommend not using it because it's not so easy to understand for everyone. Basically, the caret operator can do the same, and it's like very useful with semantic versioning, so better use that. If you want to fetch a dev version or a special branch, you can easily do that by just appending the -dev suffix to the version constraint, and then Composer will just pick the dev version for you. Or if you don't care at all, you can also just pass a wildcard, which means, yeah, just get me the latest stable release. As mentioned before, when you want to like do custom repository and like of a Drupal module which doesn't have a Composer JSON, you would have to do a more complex repository statement. So basically, you have to repeat all the metadata which is in the composer.json file, usually in here. Yeah, so you say, okay, my module is like here, fargo.example, it's that version, and you can grab it here via Git. So that's like the minimal requirements that you have here. Yeah, if you want to do that, there are also like many examples of that, like to be found in the internet. So that's not a problem. So we had that, but what we can still mention regarding the patches, what's also a very good alternative, like is in particular when the module is hosted on GitHub, to just fork it on GitHub. So you fork the module on GitHub, and then you add the fork to the project. So you can really use it as an easy to use alternative to patch file. And the advantage of that is if the module is developed on GitHub, it also works very nicely with the pull request workflow. Because you just do your change, you have the change in your repository, you create the pull request, and at the same time you have the repository created because you forked it, and you can just use that. For working on like some vendor module, we can just use the command composer create project, and it will like just clone it in a new directory, and you don't have to take care of like typing the whole Git URL to figure out where it's hosted by default. Then you can do your changes and push it into your own fork. Yeah, and for adding in your fork, you can just again specify the repository here directly. When it has a composer JSON, that's everything that's required. And then you just tell composer to check out your branch where you did your fixes. And usually it's also good to just pass the version which composers should treat your special branch as. So in particular, that's important if you would have like another package which tells I need that package with a special version, then you have to use that alias so that composer is still able to resolve the dependencies. Okay, then of course building should be fast. When you're working with Composer in a team, you have to run Composer install every time, so it shouldn't take very long. What's very nice about it, in general, it detects when you already have built everything. So once you have run Composer install and you run it the second time, it will just do nothing because it knows everything is done already. But still on the first time, you will have to fetch everything, right? So for that to be fast, Composer usually uses dist packages, which means it just uses the tarball and does not git clones, while the source variant would do the git clone. But as long as you go with the dist variant, that's like done with the option prefer dist, which is in the template by default. It's very fast, and in particular, it's able to reuse the cache. So once you get like the same version of a package like 2 times, it will just keep it in like a local cache directory, and the second time it will just copy it from the local cache directory, which is very fast. And then like a build for like a project which is solely based upon dist packages, it runs really, really fast. Yeah, then sometimes, of course, it's like something that you want to do is that you need to create a patch for a module that you have in your project, which usually is a dist directory, so you don't have a git check out of that. But Composer also makes it very easy to change the dist files into a regular Git repository checkout of the Drupal module. And it allows to do that by just passing the prefer source parameter to Composer install. But what's a little bit tricky about it is that it only applies the parameter to the things that it is fetching during the Composer install. So you first have to delete the module in place so that Composer install will actually grab it later, and then you can do the Composer install with prefer source. That's a bit unfortunate that you have to delete it first, but I don't know of a better option to like have everything in Commander. So, but that actually it works well enough for us. Yeah, and once you've done that, you'll have just a regular git checkout, so you can go into the directory and yeah, do whatever you want, make your patch. Yeah, as mentioned, Composer logs records all the versions, and what's very nice is that also Composer puts a hash into the Composer log, and that quickly creates troubles when you do like feature branches for all your changes, and 2 developers are like adding modules into separate branches. Like both will end up with a new hash in Composer log, and you will get merge conflicts. So when you like really work in a team like that, you will end up with those merge conflicts quite often. That's not very nice, but I mean, at least they are very easy to resolve. You can just do, when you resolve it, you take either version, it really doesn't care, and then you can just do Composer update log and commit that. So the Composer update log, it just recalculates the hash, so everything is fine again, and you commit that. Then there's also a feature which is called composer scripts. So composer scripts basically just allow you to record some short commands, like whatever bash command you wanna do as part of a composer.json file, and that's then available for every developer. To run the script, you just use the command composer and pass the script name, and it will just run the script. What's special about it actually is that by default it uses the vendor binaries. So in the example here, it uses PHP unit, but when you have PHP unit in your project, so it's like part of the dependencies, you will have it in your project, and it puts the vendor binaries in the path first. So if there's like PHP unit added to your project, it will use the project specific PHP unit version, and you can make sure like everyone runs the tests with the same PHP unit version. And the same thing applies to Drush actually. Yeah? You can add Drush as a dependency to the project, and then this deploy command, which I added here, it will just use the project specific Drush, which is also very nice. Then in addition to that, the Composer scripts allows you to react on events of Composer. So Composer has a list of events, but I guess the most important ones are like post package install and post create project commands. So when you put that in there as script name, then Composer will just run your script when that event happens. So post package install is in particular useful when you like, I don't know, want to remove the Git directories from a checkout, things like that. And post create project command is very nice when you like do your own project template and you want to like prepare like the configuration a little bit, I don't know, link or copy settings, PHP files and things like that. So you can really make sure that the only command that the developer needs to use is the composer command, and everything else is already automatically handled with the scripts. Yeah, it's also possible to reference other scripts with the add script name special script string. So you can combine larger scripts into more, you can like divide larger scripts into multiple smaller scripts. Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend really using it for larger scripts, but I think it's in particular handy for documented small developer shortcuts like the command for running the tests. Okay, so now we've got our Composer managed project, but how are you deploying it? In particular, when you don't commit the vendor directories. So it's like really the recommended best practice of like Composer people to not commit your vendors, and I would also recommend you to not do it, because not committing the vendors results into smaller diffs. So when you use a pull request workflow and you have peer reviews, then it really does not make sense to review all the added vendors, and it's really important to keep the pull request small, so it really results into easier reviews. Then it's also an advantage that the repositories are smaller, so when you clone it, everything will be just faster, and you have a better overview actually in your project, because when you clone the project, you only see the custom codes that you did in your project. And finally, it's really easy to work with vendor repositories and everything like that, because you don't have to mess with Git submodules or something. It's just that the vendor checkout, the Git checkout will be created by Composer, and you don't have problems with when you want to like commit the changes or anything. Okay, so when you have the vendor files not in the Git repository, how are you deploying? First variant is like you have a host which takes care of it. So that's like obviously nice, but it doesn't apply to every hosting. So there are still situations where you have to take care of it. So one variant to handle it are like deployment tools, like Capistrano is a very popular Ruby option, or there's like Deployer project, which is a PHP-based deployment project, which basically works the same way. So the projects work like that, in that they create the build, copy it to the server, and when the build and everything is done, they will just change the symlink of the production website to the new build. Then the last variant would be like to do Git-based deployments of build branches or like special build repositories. That means you create the build and then afterwards you commit it to a special branch or to a special repository. And as like in the Drupal world, it's still like quite common also to have hosts which just deploy directly from Git. It's actually a variant that I think is useful and required for many Drupal projects when you have a host like that. And I must say, in general, I like really doing Git-based deployments because it's just convenient also like when you're on a server that you can just use Git to ensure that all the files which are like on the server are like at exact that version that they should be. So I really like just using Git for that as well. Yep.
So what do you do about Git submodules in that case?
So in that case, actually, yes, you have to have a build script which takes care of it. So that's something I will come to like in 2 slides. So stay tuned. So build branches then is basically the approach that we come up with to solve how to deal with the regular branches and the branches which contain everything, which can have the whole build. So we just like for the branches that we want to deploy, we just use like the master branch, which always contains like the latest version. We always have like a build master. So everything like which is deployed, every commit will just run through the build script. The build script will create the build, will take care of the Git submodules and commit it into build master. And then in the end, build master gets deployed to the server. When you version it, so we are like using a Git flow-based branching pattern, and so we have also versions for the branches that we deploy, and we also apply the versions to the build branches and also to the build releases. And what's really important about when you do that is that when you have like the build branch and you deploy it, you may never directly change it, or even if you do, never commit the build branch and push it back to like your development branch, because then you would end up with the build in your development branch, and that's something that you don't want to have. Yeah.
So you're creating the build branches on your local and committing there, or do you have like an automated system?
So we have like continuous integration system which can do the build branch creation, but it's just a script, so you can also run it locally and push it in the repository. So we decided to keep the build branches actually in the same repository as the regular development repository, not use a second one. I think it's a good thing to do because it also enables future enhancements, like you could like build console commands which just grab your build locally. I don't know, you give it the version of the build that you deployed last week, and you can just easily check it out locally. I mean, you can do it with Git easily already, but I think you could even like build commands around it which do that, like give me the version of last week of that module to like, I don't know, check whether there was a bug in there and how it behaves right now. So I think that's like, yeah, really nice for those things. Yeah, I mentioned we have a script for doing that. So it's just a PHP console script that we built, and it really takes care of like updating the pre-existing build scripts, build branches. So if you have build master, you of course don't recreate the build master branch from scratch. You start with the existing build master branch, you merge in the changes, like all the new development changes, then you update the build, and then you can push it. And also it takes care of the tags, it takes care of the vendor repositories, so it also takes care of removing the Git directories so you don't end up with Git submodules. So we put it into like a new command line tool that we created. It's like called Fab CLI, and it's basically intended to be a tool for managing PHP applications. So right now it does not have many commands, it's really just new, but it has the build command, which is working just fine for us. So if you're interested into that, you can just check it out, and you can find it on GitHub at astronomics/fabcli. And yeah, of course, if you check it out and you have any questions, feedback, or anything to that, just come to talk to me, and would be really interested in like what you think about it. Yeah, so the way it works also is that it has a fab YAML file which you can put into a repository if you want. And what that YAML file allows is that you can customize the build command per project, because often, yeah, of course, you don't have only Composer. You might also want to like build your assets like CSS, or also, I don't know, bundle your JavaScript. So you can all add that to your build commands and customize the build script for your project. And then fab build will just take care of calling that, build it directly at your development checkout, or when you do fab build branch, it will also commit it to a branch, so you can just push the branch later on. So once you deploy the build to the server, of course, you also need to run your deployment update scripts. So like running trash update DB, importing the config, and whatever you want to do. And for that, I think it really is important and makes sense to not rely on some special server environment as far as possible. So if you use Drush for your deployment scripts, don't rely on the Drush version which you have on the server, because maybe you tested it on another server which has another Drush version. So really make sure you just avoid relying on special server environments. So everyone who works with the project, like is it a developer in a local environment, is it a continuous integration system, or like staging or live system, everything will use the same script. So just add every dependency that you have into like your repository, so you will end up with more reliable deployments. For that, you could use deployment script tools like the Composer scripts, which I've shown before. But the problem with that is it has a dependency. You need Composer installed, so you would have to have Composer on the server, what I just told you to avoid. So in that case, I would suggest to just add the composer.var file to the repository and like write the deployment commands with using that local var file, so you are sure you have like Composer and it's like working fine with that version. And another option is to use Robo. It's like a PHP task manager, which is also very nice for doing some scripts for that. It also has a var file which you can add to your project, or you can just add it with Composer directly. And then it also applies to Drush and, of course, Drupal console. So those you can add just fine as dependency to your project, and I would really recommend you doing that. And it's also done like that already with the Composer Drupal project. So if you use that, you're fine in that regard. But in general, as said, try to add all those dependencies in also for the deployment scripts to your project to make your deployments more robust. Okay, so we have a little bit time left, so let's have a look on creating reusable packages. When you use Composer, of course, when you develop code, it's also often very useful to just create reusable stuff. I guess all of you are doing that already. With Composer packages, you have like a new option of doing that, as you can like easily create reusable PHP packages. But that's like its own topic. But also, like if you do feature modules for creating reusable features, for kickstarting some stuff, or like we have one feature here for kickstarting like a media setup in Drupal 8. It's very nice to bundle that up in an easy to install reusable package. So when a developer needs it, he can just add the package and he gets everything he needs for working with that package. So to do that, basically what you have to, or what you can do is like, so there are many options. So first off, you need to make sure that the new project that you create, the repository that you have, that Composer knows about it. And the first option is the one that I have already shown you. You just specify custom repository in the composer.json file of your project. That works. But it's not very nice when you use that very often, because every time you want to use some of your reusable packages in your project, you have to take care of adding the repositories and everything first. So it's like just too labor intensive. As alternative, you can also run your own packages server. So what I've shown you on packages.org, the application it runs is like a Symfony application. The source code is available on GitHub, so you can just run that. Or there's also software of the people behind Composer, which is called torrent proxy. It's proprietary, but it's like very nice and especially built for companies who wanna like use Composer. So it also helps with proxying all the packages, so such that you can like even continue working if GitHub is like down. And finally, there's also Satis, which is also a software done by the people behind Composer, but it's like more a really tiny part, which only like is a script which basically takes a list of repositories, like the list of your repositories where you have your modules in, which scans those repositories and generates some package repository definition files, which then Composer can read. So the files it generates, it's just some static files which you can let a web server serve and you're done. But you have to run the script actually after every change to one of your modules. So it's like if you want to have a new commit and you want to have some project pick that commit up, you have to run the script first, else the script won't be, the change won't be found. So if you do that, I would just recommend you to, I don't know, run it via cron script very often, like every few minutes, or automate it in some other kind of fashion that every time you push, it's like automatically rerun. But once you have that done, you just need to add a repository once to your project, so you can do it like that. You just specify type Composer and the URL of like the special packages server that you want to add, or like the status server, and it will know all of your custom packages. And of course, you will want to edit your packages. I mean, you work on your projects, you maybe improve your reusable packages, so it would be convenient to easily commit and push your code. So what you can do with Composer is that you can instruct it that all your own packages, like you can add in your vendor prefix here, it should check out by source, so it will use regular git clones, and all the other stuff, it should use the dist approach and the tables, so it stays very fast. So we are doing it that way, and it's like very convenient so that you can easily improve your reusable packages as part of your project development. So that so far works very nice, but it has still one issue. Some modules need libraries, like Drupal libraries. So in particular, if you think about media, there are like media modules like, I don't know, Dropzone.js, which needs the Dropzone library to work with. So you would have to take care of that manually as well, what's not very convenient, but there are solutions to that approach. So possible solution would be to just add the library via a custom repository, which means you have to do your own custom repository definition at the root of your Composer JSON of the project you want to edit. That's not a very nice solution, because you don't actually, as a developer, you don't always know what repositories you would have to add with. So you would have to look up to look up the documentation, do that, follow that, and so on. So it would be a more complex task to reuse the package, and so it won't be so straightforward for the developer anymore. Then you could also use Composer scripts for letting, I don't know, Bower or NPM handle your assets, but that's also not easy, because when you use multiple packages that you add to your projects, you would have first combine all the libraries that are needed by the multiple projects into one bower.json file, script that, and then you can run it. So it's also not so simple to do, and also something that you need to take care of first. Then there's a nice Composer plugin. So Composer is extendable by plugins. So Composer Asset plugin is able to work with any NPM or Bower package. So you could just add that as dependency to Composer. What's very nice, but it has one major drawback as well. It actually requires a global installation. So you have to, as a developer, you have to install it once globally, and it does not work as regular dependency of your project. So when you use it, you lose the nice advantage of having Composer-based projects that every developer can just clone the project, Composer install, and that's it. No, it won't work anymore if you don't have the plugin installed. So fortunately, there's a fourth version. It's like assetpackages.org, which actually uses that plugin, but uses it in a way in that it provides a new packages source like packages.org, which automatically provides like a Composer packages for everything that's like a Power NPM package. So that's like very straightforward and easy to use. So basically you have to do a configuration of your project once, like you set it up in your Composer JSON file of your project. And once you've done that, it just works. So what you have to do is you add the asset packages repository to your project. And then you also have to configure Composer such that it puts the libraries in the right place. And that's done with that dependency, Composer installer extenders. And that's the configuration for it, which in particular says here, if you have a package which is like a Power asset or NPM asset, just put it into the libraries folder and it will be just fine. Given that, it's like very easy to use. So like in the package, in our DSK media starter kit package, you just require the asset that you need. And it will be automatically added in and taken care of when you use the package in your project. So usage, Composer install as regular. So that's very nice, and that's really how it should work. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you go to mic, please?
Can you use the mic?
Okay. So I have a question. When you deploy on production, because the downloading new libraries and so on takes some time, do you run this script on production, or you run it on one environment and only
No, you would never run the build script on production, so it's best to run it on, like, I don't know, some continuous integration system, or do it locally, and then like just make sure that the finally build, like, which is complete, transferred to the server and deploy it. Exactly. So like what we do is like we have those build branches and make sure everything is in there, so you don't need to run it on production anymore. So obviously you cannot do it on production. First of you might have some build dependencies which you don't have installed on the production server, and then of course you cannot like increase the downtime like by waiting on the build to complete. So it's what we wait a little for.
And probably you have some automatization also, how to move that build to the production. Yes, so when the build pass, each dependency are downloaded and everything's work. So this is also made with Composer or with different solution?
No, Composer directly doesn't take care of that. But the build script I mentioned you can use, and it will just create the build branch for you, and then you just push the build branch, and on the server you can just pull the branch in, and you have the latest build on the server. So then you don't have to take care of that. But like using Git for that deployment part is like a possible solution, or like the other deployment tools that I mentioned in the talk, like Capistrano or PHP deployer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. More questions? Yep.
Thank you very much. I really liked how you laid out all the options. So my understanding is that you try to remove as much server environment dependencies for the build process, which is good. Do you think, like we will always rely on, for example, an Apache Solr being configured if we use Solr? So do you think it's even an approachable goal to remove those dependencies?
I mean, it's two different things. Of course, your application still needs certain services in certain versions to work. But another thing is like having the scripts in place that you need to build your source code. And I don't think that the scripts that you need to build your source codes are something that even belong on like in a production environment. So the production environment should really just have the application and the code that's necessary to run, and of course the services that you have. For actually like requiring the services and all the information that you need in your project, I think it's actually very nice to handle that with environment variables, like as many hosters do it. Or what we also started doing is like having a JSON file, which actually contains the same information, and then which is just passed by a very simple PHP script to like convert all the connection information just in regular Drupal settings, which of course like differ by Drupal version, and also of course like differ by application. So if you don't have Drupal, you would have to process it in something else. Okay, then if there are no questions, then thank you.